one was due in class yesterday. So, okay, here we go. On your notes. So yesterday we talked about even and odd, and we talked about the end behavior. Joseph, my friend, we are starting. Sit up. Do you need a paper? You do. Look, you're not the only one that's tired. Get a paper and write. All right, so even degrees with a positive leading coefficient, the end behavior was up and up. So when you go from positive infinity or negative infinity, both are headed to infinity. A negative leading coefficient with even, they're down on both sides. An odd with a positive leading coefficient, it's up. It's down and up. And it's the opposite with a negative leading coefficient. So the good news is today is kind of like art class. Like it's not even like math class, it's art class. You're going to love this because it's easy. So we're going to start with this. So we talked about degrees yesterday. So first of all, to find the degree, this is already in factored form. It's actually in root form. So to find the degree, what's the power on this x? The total one would be x times x times x, which gives me x to the third, right? So my degree is 3. And it's a positive leading coefficient. So if it's a degree of 3 and a positive leading coefficient, how did the ends go? It goes down and then up. So next I want the x-intercepts, or the zeros. And it's already given to us, so we have -1, 3, and -4. And then we can find the y-intercept. And we find the y-intercept you fill in the zeros, so I get 1 times -3 times 4. So my y-intercept is -12. So let's mark these things, what we have on here. So my 0, I have a -1, a -4, a 3, and then I have a -12, which is here. And we're just sketching, so they're not exact. So here's the only new part. So if I look here, if I look at the parentheses on the outside, like, do you see this one has a 2? And number 3 has a 3. But this one doesn't have one, and this one doesn't have one. So if it doesn't have one, what's the exponent? 1. So anytime you have an exponent of 1, anytime you have an exponent of 1, at that point, you have to go through the axis. You have to go through the axis if it's an exponent of 1. If it's an exponent of 2, or an even exponent, we're going to get a bounce. It's a point of tangency. And I'll show you what that looks like. If it's odd and it's greater than 1, so 3, 5, 7, it's a point of inflection. So you only have 3 options. You go through, you bounce, or you have a point of inflection. So for this one, what is the exponent on the outside of each parenthesis? The only option is you have to go through the axis at that point. So here, I'm going through, here I'm going through, and here I'm going through. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add my end behavior. So my end behavior is down and up. Now from this information now, you can complete your graph. And it's a sketch. So I know that this is down, this goes through, but I have to go back through right here. So I'm going to go up and around, and I have to go through the y-intercept, and then I can go back up. So there's the sketch. So what's the degree of this one? 4, that's correct. So you have 1 plus 2 plus 1 gives me a degree of 4. It's a positive. Does everybody see where that 4 came from? So the x's. You want the total x's. So I have 1x, then I'm going to have 2 x's, and then I'm going to have 1x. So 1 and 2 and 1 makes 4. Okay? So if it's positive and it's even, the end behavior is up and up, right? Up, up. So now I want the zeros. How many zeros do I have? I have 3. So I have the 2, so I have 2 and 6. What's the other one? That's correct. You need the 0 because that's also a factor. And my y-intercept, I'm going to fill in the 0. So after I fill in the 0, what's 0 times everything? 0. So my y-intercept is 0, 0. So I know this is 1 point right there. My other are going to be 2 and 6. What's the end behavior? Up and up. So up and up. So what do I know happens at the 2? The 2 gets a bounce. Okay? So I know right here I have to bounce. It means it either has to be on top or on bottom, but I can't go through here. So what's the exponent on the x? 1. And what's the exponent on the x minus 6? And what happens at 1? You have to pass through. So I know I have to go through here and I have to go through here. So that tells me my bounce is going to be on the bottom, right? So this is what it's going to look like. I'm going to come up, touch, and go right back down and around. So the bounce means you touch it and go right back down, or you touch it and go right back up. So what's the degree this time? 5 is correct, and the leading coefficient is negative. So my end behavior is up and down. My x-intercepts are going to be 3, -4, and -1. And my y-intercept, I have to fill in 0. Mrs. Archer. Okay, so the y-intercept, did anybody get the y-intercept? Yes, I got positive 108. Because the negative 3 cubed would be negative 27, minus the minus would make it positive. Okay. So we got 108 there. So let's go ahead and fill in what we can fill in. So I'm going to have negative 4, negative 1, positive 3, and then I have a positive 108. So what do you think the next step is? If you were going to draw this beautiful piece of artwork, what's happening next? Ruben, what would you do? Nothing? So this is up and this is down. So next, what's the exponent at 3? So what does that tell you? It's odd, which means I have to have a point of inflection there. Okay? And then what's the exponent at the negative 4? So what does that tell you? I have to go through, and at 1, negative 1, I also have to go through, and here I'm going to have a point of inflection. So if I'm going to have, if I go through and then I have to come back up, what do I have to go through next? The 108. And when I come down, then I'm going to have a point of inflection, not there, right on the 3. So you get a point of inflection at the 3. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so the last one, what's the degree? 5. The end behavior, or the leading coefficient, is positive, so it's going to be down and then up. My zeros are going to be negative 3 and 3. My y-intercept I think it's 243. So I'm going to have negative 3 and positive 3. I have 243, which is going to be up here. So then what? What's the next step? The what? So the down and up, right? So this is down and this is up. What does the 3 tell me? So here I get a point of inflection. And what do I get at my 3? A bounce. And so does that make sense? Because this has to end up and this is going to start down. So here's what it's going to look like. I'm getting a point of inflection here. So now is everything pointed the right way? I have down, up, I have a point of inflection, and I have a bounce. It's beautiful artwork. It's beautiful. It's not even like being in math class. You're like in art class. Okay, everybody try number 1.